Well, thank you to see you all here, every one of you. I'm so hopeless technically. Maybe it's my age that I actually didn't get into in the beginning, but I came in for 𝐼𝐸𝐿𝐼𝐻. Hello, 𝐼𝐸𝐿𝐼𝐻 of Rona, and I've been listening to one after the other, telling us your extraordinary stories. And I'm speaking you now because at the same time I did manage to get into a meeting with my ambassador at the UK mission in the UN. So I'm quite good technically. I could do 2 different Zooms at the same time, telling her that it is an absolute scandal that in the latest draft of the CSW agreed conclusions, there is no mention of widows. It is unbelievable. It looks as if the very CSW itself is discriminating against widows. How could it be that they are not there in any of the paragraphs about violence to women, about marginalised and vulnerable women, about women in the context of women, peace and security? What do all these conflicts do? Conflicts which are decided by men in power. They kill the men and boys. They divide the men and boys from the women and girls. They bereave the women. They rape the women. They put the women into sexual slavery. Let us not forget that in refugee camps everywhere, thank you for hearing about the Rohingya in that widows' camp in Cox's Bazar. Look at the widows, some of them completely innocent and seduced to go to Syria. There are many, many widows of jihadist fighters, foreign widows, who are actually in limbo. It's extraordinary. I've just been talking to our ambassador. We really cannot allow this silence to go on. And I'm asked again and again. And remember, you can see how old I am. I've been working on this issue since 1995 at the Beijing Conference, when I hosted the very first international workshop on widows. But now, thanks to our friends in Kashmir, in Colombia, among the Rohingya, we're now talking about not just the widows, but the huge numbers of half widows who have no idea whether they are widows or not, whether their husbands are in mass graves or are they being tortured in police stations. And also we've got to dispel the myth that widows are mainly elderly women, because they are of all ages, including children, many child widows. And what is extraordinary is the refusal to actually recognize that widowhood, the poverty, marginalization, demonization that they suffer is a key driver of taking girls out of school into forced early child marriage, often preceded by FGM. But that whole story about the education of girls and why girls are taken out of school, why is there no recognition looking at the causes of why so many girls are out of school and boys out of school because their mothers can't keep any children in school, are also vulnerable to recruitment into what? Boy soldiery, crime, trafficking. Many of the unaccompanied child migrants, mostly boys, are left because their mothers are widows, and they hope that by migrating and finding an education and a job somewhere, they would be able to support their widowed mothers. And now we have COVID-19, and even in the draft conclusions for the Commission on the Status of Women, the whole bit about COVID-19, complete silence that the virus is killing more men than women, creating even more widows. And in that lockdown situation that these widows are suffering from, there is even more abuse and violence, and even the few avenues widows have had to maybe earn some money to put food on the table through begging, agricultural labor, domestic service, yes, even prostitution, all of that has gone. I just want to say here, and I got a call from Alice, and by the way, I don't deserve to have my name on the front of that dossier. It's Alice Lees, who's worked so hard with all of you. I mean, praise to Alice, because this dossier surely is the evidence that we all need to ensure that we get a general recommendation from CEDAW, and that the Security Council now recognizes that they've got to address widowhood issues in their framework for women, peace and security. And in spite of 1325, where do we ever see widows at the peace tables? But one exception, and I need to seek here, I'm terribly sad that we have not been able to have here among you all the wonderful, indefatigable, creative Lily Thapar, who is the founder of Widows for Women for Single Rights, Single Women's Group of Nepal, because that was where they did get widows at the peace table when that war ended with the Maoists. And when they got widows into decision making, after that war, they got 41 women into parliament and 11 of them were widows. So we want widows not to be seen all the time exclusively as victims, but no, we want to have recognized their key social and economic roles, not just as sole parents, but as the people who are working in all sorts of ways to put food on the table and struggling to have their voices heard. And I know many of you, and I can't talk to you, each of you, but well done, Rosalind of Rona Foundation, because you have done enormously to take that blanket of invisibility and secrecy of the extraordinary violence that widows, particularly in Africa and South Asia, experience under traditional mourning and burial rites. And you have been so brave, Rosalind. I admire you so much, because you're a role model for everyone to stop allowing this silence. We've got to break the silence. And I'm sorry that Lily Thapar isn't here, because she's done a lot, again, publicly, to break the appalling mourning and burial rites. You know, in her culture, widows aren't allowed to wear colored clothes or flowers in their hair or oil their hair. And I've been wonderful meetings with her in Kathmandu, where all the widows put flowers in their hair and wore colored robes. I mean, all these ways that we need to do much more now to support in every country, that widows in every country where there's a problem get together. They can't depend very often on national women's organizations who've got enough issues to deal with. They've got to have their own organizations, and we've got to share the best practice that abounds with people like the Rona Foundation in Kenya and what's happening in Nepal. Because all over the world, there are widows who can learn and share their best practice. But I think that this moment, this is the third day of the 65th session of the Commission on the UN Status of Women.
Margaret, we have to
absolutely
finish there.
Outrageous that they are not in that draft conclusion. So I ask all of you to push wherever you are with your governments, that widows are back there, in there, and that all data is disaggregated for marital status. That's enough. Thank you. You're wonderful, all of you. Thank you.